Stephen Buescher, how are you, my friend? Welcome to the Lead with Your Heart podcast.
I'm doing well, Jason. Thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation. Hopefully the audio is okay. I really appreciate the concept that we're talking about today, this idea of life, right? Leading with your heart and just figuring out this thing called life. So thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, just before we started recording, we were kind of catching up with each other and, this concept called life, right? Things happen, things shift. We were talking about the holidays, and this year was a little different for me than normal traditional stuff. My wife is off visiting her parents, so I was deemed head chef this week. And my 19-year-old daughter and we prepared the Thanksgiving dinner, the two of us, and we're figuring out as we go, right? We were just talking about ingredients, and I was making some sweet potatoes, and I didn't have condensed milk or evaporated milk, so I used condensed milk, and then I had to adjust a few other things to kind of balance that sweetness. But it's fun. It's what we do in life, right? Life is not black and white. There's a ton of gray areas, and we just figure it out as we go.
Mhm. Well, you're absolutely right about that. And that's one of the biggest things that I found is that the skill that we have of it's really the skill of resilience, right? Bouncing back after something happens. And this is something that I've been focusing on with so many different people because what I realize is that our biology is designed to assess threats, to assess things that might be, out looming out there causing us difficulty or pain. And what that does is it puts within our mind this this desire to run it over and over and over in your mind, trying to get clarity, trying to burn that into your neural pathways that this is a threat, that this is going to cause you pain, and without realizing that just that very process is causing us pain. It's causing us all of these emotions and feelings and everything else that causes us to not have that best quality of life. And so my thought is if we can kind of be the supervisor over our biology, we can start becoming aware of those automatic behaviors that exist. And even though they're there to keep us safe, even though they're there to protect us, they're not always helpful.
I love that. Be the supervisors of our biology. It's like we know things like um, sunshine and trees are good for us. So if we're inside and we're having a moment and we're feeling stuck, feeling, a tad bit lonely, I mean, we can make a choice to walk outside. Like we don't have an end goal of what we're going to do outside, but just go outside.
But there's a slight nuance because you
Yeah.
can walk outside and you can have the cloud of thoughts and everything else, and you don't connect with nature. You don't see the outside. But if you can just take a minute and just not think,
Mm,
right? Take a minute and just be, and just look at the majesty of the trees, of the leaves, of the grass, of the mountains. It can be even just the desert. It doesn't matter what it is, but there is like an energy. There's a security, and if we can step into that place of non-thinking, right? It would just being. If we can step into that place of just simply being, we actually connect to a greater majesty, and that connection can sometimes reset our very clock. It can put us into this place of perspective that says, you know what? Maybe these things that I was worrying about aren't so big, right? Maybe
yeah.
maybe there's something positive out there that I can focus on. And you know, I've had that experience where you just when you see the beauty of nature and actually really see it, it's inspiring. I mean, it sometimes it brings clarity and ideas to you that you never even knew you had.
Oh, I love that. Stephen, will you introduce yourself now that we're diving into this conversation
So,
so people know who you are?
so I started off in life, so many years I was trying so hard to understand life, and something happened in my life that did not you couldn't understand it. I mean, it just is one of those things. So I went from an engineer trying to rationally find my way through this life, and I stepped into what you would call life coaching, studying psychology, practicing hypnotherapy. What happened was I realized that I was carrying a belief. The question that I asked myself in life is, how could I let people treat me so poorly for so many years and for me to think it was okay? And so
Mm.
when I asked myself that question, I switched it a little bit and I said, what belief do I carry? And that took me down this path of realizing that we carry these self-sabotaging beliefs. And me, it was this belief that I wasn't worthy. It was this belief that, I wasn't good enough. It was the belief that I was unlovable. And when I put all that together, I instantly went down the path of trying to figure out, okay, what, what, who gave me this belief? Was it a parent? Was it a teacher? Was it a friend? Was it a sibling? And I didn't have a memory of that. And thank God for that, because I think if I did have that memory, I probably would have gone to counseling for the next 10 years and said, oh, what a terrible person this was. But since I didn't have that linking memory, I realized it didn't matter where that belief came from. I adopted it in, I adopted it to be true. And the moment that I had control over that belief, I realized I can change it. I'm yelling in my apartment that I'm lovable, that I'm important, I matter. And I shifted everything in my head. The moment that I did that, I went on this quest to help other people to not only find their voice, but to to live the best quality of life that they can. So from that, I started the podcast, the Better Life Series podcast. I started the Global Summit events to help people find their voice and help them find their message, right? To become better public speakers. And I realized that we can step into this place of confidence by shifting the way that we show up in the world. Rather than view it, trying so hard to be significant, we can actually embrace the significance, just like we embrace that significance of being out in nature. We are amazingly exceptional beings just by being who we are, just by existing. And the moment I realized that, I didn't have to strive so hard to try to be significant in other people's eyes. I actually just embraced who I was on this, the beginner's mindset, the lifelong learner. And I realized that we get better with practice. So instead of comparing myself to anybody else or judging myself critically, I let go of self-judgment. I stepped onto this path of learning and learning from others. And I grasped a message that was more important than me. And as I did this, it allowed me to step into the world of motivation, of helping others become better speakers. And when I started realizing it's really your area as well, it's stepping into this place of leadership where you see within others things that they don't see within themselves. And the moment that you can see that, you can help bring that out. And the moment you bring that out in someone else, it elevates who you are. So that's kind of the strange and lifelong journey that I went through of finding myself right here, right now on the podcast with you. But it's this realization that we write books, we speak, we do things to help other people have a better life. And it's not me to tell you what a better life is. It's for you to say, okay, this would be better for me. And then for anyone else to help you make one step in that direction. So that's what brought me here today.
I absolutely love that. Um, you know, you earlier when we talked about stepping outside and seeing nature and just that nature is amazing, but it's really, we're so focused in, I mean, this world is moving fast. I mean, we were talking about technology, was created to help us before we hit record. And this world is moving so fast that we are external creatures. We're multi-sensory, uh, messy individuals, right? Or complex. And there's so many things coming at us and around the world. And we're trying to help navigate some of those things. But what it really comes down to is starting inside, right? I love what you said that some of those things, on your journey of searching, at some point you decided it really didn't matter how I got here, but I have a choice right now. And, I am wonderful. I am loved. I am, all the things, right? And, it's the way we communicate with ourselves first, right? And so I think about cohesion between the heart and the mind and getting in alignment with, our thoughts and our feelings and how we actually take action or show up in those ways. And then after we do that with ourselves, we can go out and help others um, have that similar experience, because it's this vibrational frequency that radiates from us.
Well, we talked about biology a little bit, and it's my firm belief that we pick up on more than you know than the words. We pick up on more than even the body, just the facial expressions, the tonal quality of our skin, all of this stuff that are signals to us of is there a threat present or not. All that exists within the back of our mind. We've got this lizard brain that they call it. The what is that? The amygdala or whichever one it was. I've got some neuroscientist friends that know all of that. But we do have a part of our brain that's similar to like a lizard. It's the part that keeps us safe. It keeps our heart beating. It keeps us breathing. But also, if you ever seen like a herd of antelope, they'll all be grazing, and there'll be one that lifts its head up, and is looking for a threat. Sometimes it'll put its head down and continue to eat. But every once in a while, it'll lift its head up. It's in a state of readiness. It's tense, and it bolts. The second that it bolts, they all bolt together and almost in unison. And you can see that's in the murmuring of birds where they're flying and they're moving, and also with schooling of fish. There's a communication that exists within the animal world, and we do have that animal biology within us. And it's my firm belief that when we come into contact with somebody else, we will tend to find that median ground. Like if they're in a state of anxiety and we're in a state of calm, either they will come down to join us, or we'll go up to join them, or we'll find some place in the middle. But we'll tend to equalize and be in that same place. And so if we can be self-regulated in that space, right? If we can be calm amidst the chaos, right? This is what leaders do best. They're there still with their objective mind, thinking through what is going on, all right, trying to assess the information, gathering the information rather than reacting in a threat response mode. If we can be self-regulators in our life, and whether you call that the observer or anything else, you can invite the other person to join you. So if they come in and they're angry, all right, they're yelling. So maybe you drop into a place of curiosity rather than getting defensive about what they're yelling at you about. If we can be that observer, if we can actually hear what they're saying, maybe they'll get out what they're upset about, and we might find out it has nothing to do with us. It might be something to do with something else that's going on in their life. But the idea is if we can self-regulate, we have a 50% greater chance of having a good outcome. If we join them in the place of anger or threat response or whatever, it's probably not going to end well.
Yeah. Yeah, that is so true. And, when in a leadership environment where there's teams, you're constantly being influenced as a leader by all the things going on around you. And, for the past few years, I've been hearing, there's a lot of talk about emotional intelligence, having empathy, compassion, and that is all very true. But I think as a leader, it's what is your responsibility is the big question. Like that's where we should start. And when we think about everything starts inside of us first and then radiates out, understanding that all thoughts, all actions initiate or start or come from one of two energy sources: love and fear. And when we have a team member who's maybe underperforming or frustrated, or it's not going well, like you said, we could, if we address that and go with it, it could not be good. But if you can address that from a place of fear, which would be, oh my gosh, this person needs to get their act together because I'm going to have to get on a call and explain the situation to my boss. So I'm fearful of that conversation, and so I operate from that fear and manage the employee in a way that isn't a great outcome. But if the same employee is frustrated and there's this thing going on, same situation, whatever it is, and I come from a place of love, and I go, oh, well, that's compassion, that's empathy, and being curious, right? Like, okay, take a breath, tell me what's going on, where are you at, what was the situation, really understanding this person's anxiety, frustration, like where things went awry, and kind of dialing it back, right? Like that's heart-centered leadership.
Well, it's amazing leadership because what it does is there's two things that come to mind for me is one, you know, it's a place of non-judgment. So it's by being in that place of curiosity, it's saying, okay, this may have happened, but it doesn't define who you are. And the second thing is it kind of views it as a skill set. So it's like, okay, well, this happened. Maybe there's some skills that you could learn either in communication and planning and being, being more confident in being able to say, oh, this is going on rather than kind of hiding it until it becomes a landmine and blows up in everybody's face. It's this idea that it's having that ability to actually voice, what's going on and to share that without, you know, overly negative repercussions or judgment. And I think if we can get into that place of acceptance, non-judgment, and turning things into like a skill-based assessment of, okay, how can we make you better at this skill? Not judging the person, but judging the behaviors and the actions and saying, okay,
Yeah.
what can we do to improve this? To me, it seems like that would be a wonderful way to change. And the thing that comes to mind is we need to do that first with ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Like we can grow into being a wonderful leader, but I promise you, 15, 20, 30 years ago, I didn't have the knowledge that I have today. Or or maybe I did, I just wasn't able to tap into it and articulate it in a manner that made sense.
Right.
Yeah.
So I had the similar problem because so I grew up and one of the things we were talking about food earlier, one of the things that I love about food is it I feel the chemistry within my body. So I'm sensitive in that nature that yes, I feel the if I eat a chocolate, I have I have that sensitivity and I can tell that chemistry that's going through my body. But also the same is true for conflict or for love or for enjoyment or for excitement. All of these feelings have different chemistries that my body I'm actually aware of it. I notice how it feels as it's going through my body. And that's caused me some problems in the past because if you're sensitive, um, and it can create feelings that are strong that you don't like or that you do like, right? So like there'd be times that I'd eat a whole bag of M&Ms, I loved it, But the idea is it wasn't the best decision for me, right? You get that sugar crash at the end. But the same is true for conflict. So sometimes having a sensitive nature, I would avoid conflict because I didn't like the feeling of conflict. But that this allowed me to stand up for myself on occasion. So there's a balance in the middle there. And what I love is I think that there's a balance between if you take somebody that's sensitive, if you take somebody that avoids conflict, that doesn't stand up for themselves, and teach them by emotionally regulating that not only do you receive these emotions from others, very empathic in nature, but once you're regulated, you can actually kind of project those emotions. You can actually become a great leader because you can kind of set an even keel in the team and people just feel calm around you. They have this sense of peace when they're around you. And that is it's a strange thing that happens. But if you can bring people at peace when there's conflict, or you can bring people a sense of peace or well-being when there's difficulty or division, that's an amazing skill to have because what it does is it opens up the dialogue. It allows people to actually voice what's going on within them, and and gives them that sense of security that it'll be okay, right? They can say something even if it's probably not the best thing to say. They can recover from it and learn and move on, right? So
Yeah. And I was thinking while you were talking, and then you said it, it's a skill. Like just like uh time management is a skill, just like, learning, Excel or, Microsoft Office products and how to navigate through them. I mean, those are skills, right? Leadership is a skill. Finding your calm is a skill. Um, Creating an environment where people have that feeling is a skill. The feeling of that we're accepted and it's okay. And one of the things that I come across talking to other leaders, um, is that, you know, the way we've done business for so many years, especially in corporate America, and even compounded when you're a publicly traded company, is that we have to be able to measure things, right? Like if we can't, like you can be a wonderful heart-centered leader, create an environment for people to thrive, and have positive results, but then it's interesting that you try to help people with that and they say, oh well, I need to be able to measure this on like a weekly basis, or because or a quarterly basis or monthly basis, right? Like that's the structure of corporations. We're under this immense amount of pressure to deliver results and to be able to say, oh, if I buy something for $1 and I sell it for $3, I cover my overhead, right? The simple math of business, and trying to put that into leadership terms, or an environment where you're trying to help people be the best versions of themselves, is difficult to measure, right? It's like, you know, um, many things that we do. If you go for a run in the morning, you come back, you're not going to be healthy. But if you go for a run or a jog or a walk every morning, then you start to see a change and a shift. But you can't say, oh, it's going to happen on day 5, or it's going to happen on day 20, right? It's different for everybody because you're starting from a different place.
I love that. And, because we started this thread with this idea that, that the qualities of leadership are a skill. And then we moved into this, quality of life. And to me, it's everything begins with a choice, right? It doesn't even mean that you need to have the answer of knowing how you're going to do something. But it's also it's this idea of becoming curious about your life and finding out what works for you. And so if we're talking about, the qualities of leadership, there's so many different types of leaders that are out there, but there's also, if we're looking at the KPIs of life, the things that measure the quality of life, so often we get it wrong because we're in this egoic space of significance. And if we're talking about the ego, and when I say the egoic space, I'm talking about our our sense of self,
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
human experience, which is everything that we believe, everything that we've experienced. It's the physiology of our body. It's all of this that makes us human. It's this, it's this path we're on in life is right now. And there's some qualities that I think that we have as an egoic being, which are our need for significance, right? We're trying so hard to prove that we're significant. And I do believe that we have a spiritual component to ourselves as well. And that spiritual component has no need for significance. Just like the beauty and the awe of the trees and the mountains and everything that you see in nature, we have a beauty of just being. And then part of that egoic experience is this fear of death, this fear of being singled out or judged or criticized. And that's part of that egoic sense. But from that spiritual side, there's no judgment, right? There's no everything's okay. There's consequences to everything that we do, right? We'll deal with that, we'll learn from it, but we'll get better. And the sense that I get is when we're looking at this whole skill set, you make a choice and then you just step out on the path of curiosity and you find out what works. And as you start doing that, you can actually embrace this place of peace, of non-judgment, of acceptance. And if you're in that place of non-threat, we make such better decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just I keep saying this, but I love what you just said. Because it's getting some skills that aren't necessarily taking in a situation to an end result, right? Like it's constant, it's in continuum, it's in constant flow, right? Like what works today in this situation say we hit all the marks and we do all the right things and it's just absolutely perfectly executed for this whatever this situation is. Tomorrow, the situation has evolved. It's going to be or it's a different situation. There's different factors. But when you can, so what you used yesterday might not exactly apply tomorrow, which is I say this because I think a lot of people are looking for some concrete playbook. And the playbook is the core skill that helps you navigate situations, right? So it's not like you go, oh, they did this, let me reference the playbook. Oh yeah, page 3. Oh, this is what I need to do next. Right? It doesn't work that way.
Right.
Um,
And it'll break your brain trying to figure it out too.
yeah. Yeah, which is interesting because you mentioned that you're an engineer or have an engineer background, right? And which as you're talking, I'm thinking, gosh, engineers like to break things down and figure out how they work, and that's exactly what you've done with life, being human.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it's interesting because it doesn't mean what I'm saying has any merit, right? I look at all the books on the shelf behind me, and so many people we're in this credentialing society, which means somebody else is going to dictate to you that you're good enough to publish a book or you're good enough to be an expert in this area. And I kind of look at that and think, well, but the people that are experts, nobody told them that they were the expert, right? It's like so find your thing, find your idea. And once I grasp onto this concept that just be the best person that you are. If there's something that comes to mind, learn about it, figure out what it is that is interesting to you about that. Find your purpose. I think if we can go down that path and realize that we are good enough, even if we're flawed, even if we're wrong, it's okay. The greatest minds before us were flawed and wrong, and they did great stuff. So
and by the way, we are flawed and we are wrong. I mean, that's the definition of being human. We
right.
are we are fractured creatures and we're figuring it out, but finding that identifying those emotions that bubble up inside of us, asking yourself that question, is this coming from a place of fear or a place of love? Because those are the two sources of energy, and you have to have both, right? Like, I don't want to get all philosophical, but you can't have love without fear. You can't have dark without light. Light doesn't exist unless there's darkness. Otherwise, it just is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The way that I view that is both exist, but we
Yeah.
can choose where we place our attention and our focus, and we can choose what we grow. There's the old story about the two wolves, and it's an American Indian tale of a grandfather speaking to a grandson, and he's talking about that there's this battle there's a battle within every man or every woman of two wolves, and one wolf is there, judging, biting, trying to take others down, ridiculing, being negative, and being cruel. And then there's another wolf that's loving and kind and nurturing and feeding the rest of the pack and doing all the positive things. And the grandfather says these two wolves are battling constantly, and the grandson goes, grandfather, which wolf will win? And the grandfather says, the one that you feed.
Mm. Yeah.
So,
Y-
it's a beautiful story, but it's true, right?
Yeah.
It's where we place our attention and our focus is what we're feeding.
Yeah. And I really love that you said they both exist. And it's often people try to think, black, white, but it isn't black and white. It's gray. Sometimes it's dense, sometimes it's light. Uh, and it's really it's not this or that, it's this and that.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, and.
You know, to the way what I figured out in life is that we have this thing called role identity, and this is something a term that I've coined, and it means that we have expectations on somebody based on what we're viewing them to do and who we're viewing them to be. So what that means is we might have a different set of expectations around acting as a parent, or acting as a father, or acting as a mother. We may have a different set of expectations when we're acting as a sibling, right, brother or sister.
Mhm.
We might have a different expectations when we're in a place of work, or we're in a place at home, or vacation or holiday. So every role that we're acting through has a different set of expectations, and we act differently. So it creates this fluctuation, and it's hard to predict because we don't know what role somebody's acting in. And we're looking at them, and we're assigning a role to them. So we see them, oh, you're a worker, it's a weekday, you should be acting this way. But they might be thinking, well, I'm actually a parent, my kid's sick, and this is going on. So it creates this undefined, it throws in a little bit of confusion in the prediction algorithm that says, okay, this is what we're expecting. And one of the people that I've talked to said, an expectation is simply a premeditated resentment. I love that phrase.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, because we do have expectations, right? Like,
Yeah, but it's a zero-sum game. We can't win with an
yeah.
expectation. Either they accomplish it, which is okay, you did what we expect you to do, or they didn't do it. Now we have resentment.
Yeah, yeah. And look, I think we cannot not go into a situation or walk into a room without expectations, but it's about reframing our expectations, right? And I don't mean lower the bar. Um, I mean, expect that I'm gonna just flow with whatever energy is there in the best goodness of myself.
Right. But also there's communication that goes along with that, because
Mm,
it's having someone that's willing to participate in this game of understanding. And okay, do they understand where you're at, and what your needs are, and because each one of us, especially when you're talking like in a corporate environment, we're in the middle, right? We're under pressure from the top, and we're under pressure from the bottom. And so it's this
yeah.
idea of, it's like, okay, how can we get everyone to be moving in the same direction and feel like they're inclusive, that they're part of the team, that they're valued. Really, that this is the key. How do you make people feel like what they do matters, and their
Mm.
voice is important, right? And if we can do that, then maybe we can be clear on communication. So we've got a little bit better chance at predicting how things are going to be next week or next month.
Yeah. And the other side of the coin of communication is comprehension, right? Like it's part of communication. And it's this exchange of energy, not, oh, I need to communicate to my team what the top is saying. Like the people that are if you're in this middle area, and so you have your team in a hierarchy or an org chart, right? The people below you structurally are closer to the situation than you are, right
Right.
there, because it's about serving your client, whether it's another business or whether it's consumers. They're closer to the situation, and so it's our job in this environment, like we are feeling these pressures, but how can I communicate in a way that allows people to speak freely, right? Creating this psychological safety,
Right.
right? It's about the belonging and the inclusion, and you do matter, and I value your opinion, and please put it on the table, and then collectively as a group we're going to navigate our path or our strategy.
A friend of mine he's a manager in a technical firm, and it's very high stress. It's a big company, and he protects his team. I mean, his main job is to be the funnel, the funnel from the information from the top. And every once in a while, he's got a VP that is like, she wants to know who everybody is on his team, and exactly what they're doing and everything else. And one time, she said, "Oh, who can I give kudos for this?" And he said, "Oh, this person did it." And then he realized, oh, I just told it, I just let known who's on my team, that and it opened up this dialogue between the VP and this programmer. And it was, the problem was, is there's a disparity in, you know I don't know what you want to call it, but there's a disparity in the way that people interact when there's hierarchy, right? If somebody's like a big boss, and it put this person in a state of stress, and they
Mm,
ended up having kind of like a little bit of a burnout situation, where they were under so much pressure. They kept getting pulled into high level meetings, and
mm,
they were programmer, they were working on a high profile job, but they weren't equipped to handle that kind of pressure. right? And it could because they
Mm,
had five different people asking them different things without realizing that you can't say yes to everybody.
yeah.
And so what I realized my friend was the role that he was playing in protecting his team and in communicating with all the VPs in a way that was, you know, he was doing a wonderful job of just keeping that safety and security so people could focus on their jobs.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Being a leader is like being a parent when you start about protecting your team. It's right. You're protecting your children. And I think about when my kids were little, I think of it as kind of this, from an employee standpoint, as like a new hire, right? Like I've got to protect them. I've got to let them focus on their s- skills, hone their skills, get really good at their job, being that team member in that position, right? And then and then eventually, as a father, my kids start to get older, more tenured, right? Their experience level. Now, my job is to protect them as they go out into the world, right? To equip them to not need me from a day-to-day protective standpoint. Now, I hope that my children will always need me, um, because my parents are older, and I'm going to be 50 in January, and my father is I need him sometimes, right? Like I need to hear his voice and hear his wisdom and his guidance, and so I don't think that we ever want that to go away. But just navigating through life in the world, right? So it is this balance of, because I do agree that when you're in this leadership position, and you said, protection, but I, or a funnel, and I've always looked at it as a filter,
Mm.
right? Like filter the message coming down and restate it in a way that let it pass through me, but restate it to keep that cohesive psychological safety, that environment, so that those people can thrive in the things that they're good at, right? Like you said, sometimes people aren't equipped. Not, and the reality is not everybody should be a parent
Yeah.
or wants to
Well,
be a
well,
parent.
the thought is not every parent is a conscious parent. And
Yeah.
and and the thing is only about 15% of the population are actually viewed as self-aware. And there's two, if you ask somebody if they're self-aware, most people will say yes. But the thing is true self-awareness is not only when you believe you're self-aware, but those around you think that you're self-aware as well. And that drastically cuts the numbers down. But with parenting as well, it's like we act in this program behavior. We actually just propagate the ways that the parenting styles of our parents.
Yeah.
And and I noticed the emotional intelligence book behind you. That is not something that's taught in school. So
Yeah.
whatever the emotional intelligence model is that we have growing up, whatever the grandparents had that gave to your parents, that came to you, we're stuck with that. And it's usually when something happens in your life that you come to a choice point. You say, okay, I can't live like this anymore. I can't have these people in my world, or something needs to change. Usually it's born of a lot of pain or a lot of pressure. And then all of a sudden you'll blossom into this, okay, I can do this differently. I can think differently, or I can be differently. And to me, it's this idea, instead of using emotional intelligence, I call it emotional maturity, because
Mm,
it's growing in your ability to understand your emotions, understand your awareness. And if we can hone that, then it allows us to act in a more mature way. Instead of having those little tantrums that we used to have as a child, we can actually say, okay, how is it that I want to be? And if we're talking about leadership, there was a moment that I realized it's like I say so many things. Humor was my defense mechanism. I say so many things that are unhelpful or meaningless. And why do I do that? I do it to either diffuse tension or to elevate
mm,
myself, as put myself in the spotlight that I've said something funny. But a lot of times it's meaningless. And
yeah.
so as you step into leadership, you realize, okay, what am I saying and why am I saying it? And I always like the three rules of communication. Is it necessary? Is it kind? And is it true? If it's not yes to all three, then you just don't say it.
Oh man, I love this conversation. So, Stephen, how do you show up in the world for your clients?
So I just show up as myself. And the thing is I show up with the belief and the realization that anyone out there in the world, right, if they're trying to get to someplace, often we either have a very critical thought loop that might be in our mind, or we might be living in an experience where our emotions are out of balance. We might be having too much stress or too much pressure. The way that I show up for them is with the possibility and the belief that you can do some amazing things just by starting with a choice. It doesn't mean that you have to have the answer. It just means, okay, how do you want life to be for you? All right. And then what's one small step that we can take in that? So I just show up as my authentic self. And so many people, I mean, I get so many wonderful messages that say, you know, I've had such an influence on people's lives, or I've helped them in a deep, profound way. And even the people that say, "Oh, you didn't help me at all," I'm going, okay, you know, I'll check back with you in like 6 months and see where you're at. And it's good. It doesn't mean that what we talk about or what we say. Um, the only thing that I'm carrying forward is I'm opening up a possibility that something might be different.
Mm,
And then it's this journey together of, okay, how do we discover what will work for you? And if we can discover what will work for you, all right, now it's a skill. Now it's something that's a possibility, and we can get better with practice on how to make that
mm,
stronger, how to get better at that ability. And those are things like public speaking, confidence, um, becoming less stressed, right? Doesn't mean that you're going to be stress free. It just means that you have better regulation skills, that something stressful happens, you learn how to reframe it, you learn how to change it within your response, and you learn to notice that chemistry within your body that, okay, this very traumatic thing just happened. Do I need to breathe through it? Do I need to do whatever and get through this? All right, now what am I going to do to move forward? And that takes something that may have knocked you out for a month. It may have knocked you out for a week or a day. Now you're only dealing with a few hours, and you're changing that within your body and saying, okay, I can handle this. Now what am I going to do from here? So that's the way that I just show up authentically and curious.
yeah. Yeah. And that's a great way to show up, being curious, right? It's because everybody's at a different point. Things are different going on. Stress is interesting because you hear people say, "Oh, I want a stress-free life." Well, I'm sorry to break the news, but that's not going to happen, right?
It's
Stress,
not possible
yeah,
because, right.
yeah, yeah. Stress is around us. Like it happens all the time. I mean, it could be a small moment of somebody in front of us slamming on their brakes, right? Your stress levels go up. But what you were saying is it's about recognizing it and managing it and practicing it because it is a skill.
And well, it's also a link between it's this whole idea that I was talking about the threat prediction model, right? It's like, because if there's somebody that stresses us out at the office and we're thinking about them, we're creating this chemistry of stress. It's the cortisol. And that stress, that's there to remind us, okay, there's a threat on the horizon. You might need to bolt, you might need to run. That's why exercise is so effective, because like in the times in the past, we'd see the lion, okay, fight, flight, freeze, we're going to run. If you
Mhm.
run, you work through all that cortisol, and then all of a sudden now the cortisol and the adrenaline, now you can actually be in a place where you're panting, breathing in the bush or up in the tree or wherever, and you're dissipating all of that chemistry. Well, we don't do that now. So we have the threat, but we don't have any way to get rid of it.
Mm,
And so if we can recognize that these things are part of our biology. So anytime someone judges us, anytime somebody rejects us, anytime we feel like we're being criticized or singled out, right? If we're the focal point of a lot of attention, we have to determine whether that's a threat or not. If our lizard brain says we're in a threat position, we will have the chemistry of stress. It's just boom, it's there. But if we can be in that place of confidence where we don't view as a threat, then we don't have that expression of chemistry, or we can reframe it within our mind and actually change how we're feeling. There's one thing I learned that was interesting is, if we're talking about stress and we're talking about excitement, the chemical profile within our body is about 95% the same. And like the symptoms, like your palms might get wet, moist. Your heart rate might get elevated. Your breath might become shorter and have these shorter little breathing. But there's one difference at the very end of this expression profile. Oxytocin comes in. That's that connection hormone, right? The cuddle hormone they
Mm,
call it. If we can bring that in, all of a sudden it changes this feeling of stress and anxiety to this feeling of exhilaration. I had it when I jumped out of an airplane a couple weeks ago, right? I did the skydiving, and I was terrified. But what was weird was my mind switched my experience of fear. So yes, I was doing some jokes to try to dissipate it, but I still had that chemistry. My chest was tight. I felt all in it at the very end. I just had to be in a place of trust. So I was jumping tandem, and I just said, you know what? I'm going to let this person just push me out of the airplane. I'm not going to resist. I'm just going to just go with it. In the first few seconds of falling out of that airplane, you leave your stomach behind. And what's amazing is just like in that threat response mode, time almost stopped. In that moment of just taking a breath, remembering to breathe, I was doing like the short breaths.
mhm.
I was almost like in that giving birth, like the
Yeah.
and when I did that, um, all of a sudden I realized that the time slowed down for me, and it was a beautiful experience. I really, really enjoyed it. And when I got down, I realized that, this changes your relationship with fear of death. It changes your relationship with life, and it's a beautiful experience. So, it's so many people I talked to said I would never do that. And I was worried about doing it because I do have a back injury, and I was like, oh, but I realized I'll never be able to do this again, if things get worse. And I've always wanted to do it. So I came up with this quote that says, quit waiting to be ready and just do it.
Mm, I love it. And it really goes to show as well, the importance of trust,
Yeah.
right? Like you were having tremendous anxiety about stepping out of this plane.
Yeah.
And then you realize that I've got somebody who is in control of this. They're
That had
trained,
1,100 successful jumps before.
1,100 successful jumps, right? Like I'm going to trust this human and I'm going to let go, leave my stomach behind and just be at peace. What a beautiful moment.
Yeah, the thought that came to my mind was, I need to quit being afraid of dying, and I need to start living. And the moment that you start living, it opens up so many possibilities that were not there before.
Yeah, so wonderful. Thank you so much for being my guest today, Stephen. If people want to connect with you, what's the best way to get in touch?
So the best way they can probably get in touch with me is through my email, which is steve@mybest-life.com. And that's what I'm hoping that everyone has out there. It's like, find out what you want out of life. This life is precious, and just grasp it, do it.
Yeah, so, so beautiful. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you, Jason. You're amazing, my friend.
You as well.